live speaker series event brought to you by the Foundation for Free Enterprise Education. We hope you've had a great week. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. And for our return viewers, it's great to see you again. Thank you all for joining us. By now, we hope you see why the motivational speakers who dedicate their time and talents to our organization are simply the best in the country. They share their stories and knowledge with all of us because they truly care. Their ability to connect with each of us is what makes them so special, and we can't tell you how grateful we are for their commitment to our organization. If, as you listen to them, you think of an occasion or an event that might benefit from hearing their messages, please feel free to reach out to us or to them directly to try and make that connection. Just a few reminders, as you listen, if you have questions or comments, feel free to share them with us in the Q&A box. We will be monitoring your questions and we'll get to as many of them as possible at the conclusion. Please note, all questions and comments can be sent anonymously. We know many of you would rather wait and ask them during the meet and greet following the webinar, and that's perfectly fine. Speaking of the meet and greet, we invite all of you to join us so you can ask questions and speak directly with our presenter. It will begin 5 minutes after this webinar ends, but you have to click on the different link in order to participate. That meet and greet link is now available in the chat section, so be sure to copy it down. We can't wait to see you there. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have enjoyed bringing these live events into your home every Thursday evening and look forward to continue doing so for the next few weeks. Be sure to visit our website, pfew.org, for more information about past events, future speakers, and our taped interview content. So let's get started. We are so excited to be welcoming back half of the dynamic duo from our very first live session when we heard from Sweethearts&Heroes. They deliver messages of bystander empowerment, empathy, and leadership to all audiences, including K-12 students, colleges and universities, teaching professionals, and corporations. Children, teachers, parents, and all members of society need to know that we all have the potential to be someone's sweetheart and the power to be a hero. Please welcome back from Sweethearts&Heroes, Mr. Tom Murphy.
Well, it's great to be back. And I just lost my view of my screen, but I don't need it. How about that? Well, it's great to be back, PFEW. And this is the first time that I've ever done this leadership presentation online like this. So I could not be more excited, and I couldn't be more excited to be deep into summertime and not 100 or 150 or 200 people on this call, for the very reason that I love doing this presentation is because I typically go into schools when I do a leadership presentation and I say, give me those kids that have the potential for leadership. Give me your leaders. And sometimes I scratch my head and I say, but I don't want all of the high flyers. I just want the kids that want to be in there. And sometimes it's because they know that I'm there, and it might be exciting because they know something about me and my story. It doesn't matter. I want the people that are going to want to be there, which is the most important thing for me. And that's the people that are on this call right now, the ones that want to be here. Now, one of the most asked questions, 10 years, over 1 million students Rick and I have presented to, the most asked question I always get is, why are your fingernails painted? And I always say, well, duh, I'm a superhero. And people do this and I just never skip a beat. And then I just go on with the discussion that I'm in. And I almost ignore the question when people ask me. I just say, duh, I'm a superhero. And then I move on, because it's not the time to have that conversation. Now is the time. And when we go to schools and have this conversation around leadership is the time to have it. Because I always tell everybody, I said, well, I can't give you all these lessons right now because it'll take me a solid hour to give it. So those of you that are on right now, you're in for a big time treat, because I don't give these lessons out often. We're usually at schools to talk about what I consider a much more important object, a much more important message. But this one for me is almost equally as important, because these leaders that we talk to and that we help create are the ones that truly have the potential to change and save lives in the environments that they're in. But let's get started here on leadership. And one of the first things that I always say to young people when I talk about leadership, I say, what's a leader? That's the first place I start. So if you're taking notes, and I would always suggest that if you have a piece of paper and a pencil or a computer, or you can pull your phone out like I do, because I take tons of notes on my phone. Sometimes when I go to the movies, I take notes. When people are talking and they say something to me that I got to remember, I say, oh, can you hold on a second? And I pull my phone out and I say, oh, I got to remember that. And I write it down, because I learned years ago that the best students take the best notes. So if you have a pencil and paper, get it out, because I'll give you a few nuggets. And here's one of them. When I first start talking about this thing called leadership, I say there's a formula to leadership, because I'm not convinced that leaders are just born. I truly believe that leaders are made through a specific formula. I think there's a component, a natural component to leadership, but truly I think anyone has the potential to be a leader if they have this formula. And we're not going to talk deeply about this formula tonight, but I'm going to give it to you. We're going to talk about really one aspect of this formula tonight, but you should have the formula. And the number one thing when I talk about what a leader is, he or she has to have self-awareness. And I think it was Socrates that said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And you have to be willing to examine and to look at yourself, like you're looking in a mirror all the time. I think that on the temple of Apollo at Delphi, they had those 3 maxims. And one of them, and remember, it was on the entryway in. So before you even went into the temple, you had to understand this one. The first maxim was know thyself. So leaders have to be willing to look at themselves and to continuously inspect every aspect of their being. That's part of the formula. I say S plus S, which is strategies. And that's what we're going to talk a lot about tonight, because all of these are different strategies in leadership. And I'll get to that in a second. And the last one, of course, is action. A. And if you know me and you know the Sweethearts and Heroes message, you'll know that one of our buttons is jumping into action. It's that idiom that most of you know, especially if you're in middle school or high school. You know that one because you still watch the movies. If I walked into your class and I said jumping into, and I scratched my head, you would just finish that sentence. And especially the younger you are, the easier it is to finish that sentence, because you know that's what superheroes do. They jump into action. And action takes practice, practice, practice. So if I had to give you the formula in 3 letters, I would say S, S, A. S plus S plus A. You could turn that around to remember it really easy if you wanted to. That's an easy way to remember it. But self-awareness plus strategies plus action equals a leader. If you have the right strategies and you're willing to do the work. Now, I don't want to get lost in this formula because I want to get to some stuff to me that's much more important. And that's the second part. And this is the gift I want to give you tonight, because when I boil leadership down or a leader down, one of the number one things in quick sound bites I give to young people, I say leaders are strategy collectors. Leaders are strategy collectors. I tell kids all the time that life is not a talent contest. It's a strategy game. I'll say it again. There's one you can write down. Life is not a talent contest. It's a strategy game. And I can prove that all to you. I can make you understand that that's the truth, because anyone on this call, you've never met anyone that got the grades that I did in high school. I had a combined 630 on my SATs. Now, mom or dad, if you're listening beside them, don't try and click this off and say, well, we're not going to listen to this guy. Because for any of you educators that might be listening, you probably almost fell out of your chair because some of you got that on 1/2 of your SATs. I didn't have strategies. I had tons of strategies for wrestling. And I love talking this angle of leadership with young people. And I got some great stories about the fact that I didn't have any strategies academically. I had them for sports. And it really wasn't until I got to college, and I was lucky to get in, but it wasn't until I got there that a couple of people came into my life and they said, Tom, you got all the strategies that you need to be successful. You've proved it through the sport of wrestling. What you have to do is learn to apply those same strategies to academics. And I'll give you one quick example on how easy it is to understand this part of the formula. The NCAA basketball tournament. A lot of you follow it. If you don't, sometimes you just get the paper and do what I do is just guess a bunch of names, whatever one you think has the best name, you pick that one. But I think from year to year it's different, but there's, I think, roughly 68 teams in the NCAA basketball tournament in the month of March, typically, right? So if I were to say to you, it's a single elimination tournament, how many total games out of 68 teams are played in the month of March for the tournament? You know that they played someone this weekend, someone this weekend. Now, some of you just took that piece of paper and you think, well, I can figure this out. Let's see, 32 here and 30-something here. And you start to calculate it. And that's what I would have needed to do until I figured out the strategy. Because I already gave you all the answer. 99.999% of people that I say that to, they never catch it. But I already gave you all the answer. You just didn't have the best strategy. You had a common strategy. Write half of the names down on one side, write half of the names down on the other side, and start crossing them out and counting. Let's see, there's 1 game, 2 game, 3 game, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I told you it was a single elimination tournament, which means that there's how many losses? If there's 68 teams, how many losses are there? 67. 67 losses, because every team has to lose except for one. So how many games are there? 67. Now, I'm no math wizard. I just got the strategy to figure stuff like that out. So for me, as a leader, when I'm thinking about the second part of this formula and the strategies that I'm focusing on are there to make me a better leader. And I collect strategies. Everywhere I go, I pretend I have this magical backpack on and it's invisible. And when I meet someone and they give me a strategy, I take it and I roll it up and I put it in my backpack and I take it with me forever. And I've been wearing that backpack for about 25 years now. And it's full of, it's overflowing. I mean, my strategies are just, they're like coming out of both sides because I got so many strategies. Now, I want to give you some strategies for leadership tonight. What I think are the greatest things that a leader has to know. And if you want to be a leader, if you want to change your life, if you want to change the lives of others forever, these are what you need to know. In my 25 years of business, in my 15 years of speaking, in my time as a father, as my time as a husband, all of these things require some aspect of leadership. And these are the most important strategies when it comes to leadership. Now, there are books upon books upon books of stuff that's written on leadership. You'll never find this combination of things. I've studied this intensely, and most importantly, I've applied it to my own life, and these are the most important things you have to know as a leader. Now, when I go to schools and I sit a bunch of kids together, I say, give me those kids that really want to see me, like I said, that want to spend some extra time that you might think might be a leader or have some leadership potential. Give me those kids. And when I get them together, I always do the same thing. I always say, what's leadership? And I usually don't even go into that formula yet because I got to get through this usually in about 40 minutes. So I say, what's leadership? And then I sit back and wait, and nobody says anything. And maybe one or two people say something really quick. And then I usually give them a quick little talk on vulnerability. And it's really hard to make yourself vulnerable in front of your peers. That's a tough thing to do. But I need someone in here to be vulnerable. Now, I want you, if you're with your parents or your friends or even by yourself, I want you to think about what your definition of leadership is. And I've done this in hundreds and hundreds of presentations and schools. And someone will throw their hand up and they'll say, I say, what's leadership? And they say, someone that leads. And I'm like, dude, that was brilliant. Like, you just blew my mind. I'm like, come on, what's leadership? And then someone says, someone that takes charge. And I say, ooh, I like that one. That sounds good to me. Someone that takes charge. And then it gets everybody else warmed up. And then somebody says, someone that does the right thing and puts others first. And I'm like, oh, that's a terrible answer. Like, you should stop talking the rest of the time we're together. Yeah. Like, that was awful. And I look around and nobody wants to put their hand up. And I'm like, come on, what's leadership? And then somebody's like, someone that helps others. And I'm like, that's about as bad as their answer. You should just be quiet. Like, don't talk anymore. That's awful. And then nobody says anything. And then I take kind of a serious tone and I say, was usually to one of these two that gave me this answer that I kind of shut down and made feel a little bit small. And I didn't do it to hurt their feelings. I did it to have a good conversation. And I say, was Adolf Hitler a leader? And we could talk about some of the others throughout history, whether it's Stalin or Mao or some of these other people that led their countries. And we know that a giant portion of Germany, and it's getting to a debate and saying, were people just doing it to comply? Or, just like in Christopher Browning's book that I just finished, Police Battalion, Ordinary Men, Police Battalion 101 was responsible for like 85,000 deaths. And were they all just a bunch of monsters, or were they led by someone? Were they led by multiple people in the Third Reich? And I don't think we can argue too much that Adolf Hitler was definitely a leader. When I talk to young people, I say leadership is composed of three things. Now, you're going to want to write these down. You're going to want to remember them, because this is what leadership is. Number one, most importantly, I say leadership is about influence. It's not good. It's not bad. It's about influence. When I talk to educators, and I do a lot of educational presentations for just teachers or educators, I always say to them, ooh, I love to go to playgrounds and watch. And if you pause like that, somebody says, oh, Tom, you should probably say that a different way. And I just, again, say that to just catch everyone's attention, because if there is a thing called natural leadership born, that's where you can see it the best. If you go to a playground and you watch kids, and I do it in laboratory environments. I take kids and we watch kids. We take usually older kids, middle and high school kids, and we go to the playground at the school when we're doing some programs and we watch. And what do you see? You see this thing called chaos. Now, by definition, chaos means complete disorder and confusion, right? But if you go into a physics textbook, you'll see that it's behavior so unpredictable as to appear random, owing to great sensitivity to small changes in conditions. Now, there's a lot of words there. It's a kind of a big, messy definition, but it's a playground. It's chaos, but it's a system, and you have to understand that. And tiny little changes in that system, like rolling a ball out into the middle of a playground, everything changes. The directions change, the heads change, what they're doing may change, just tiny little changes in that conditions. But if you really pay attention and you watch, you'll see kids influencing other kids everywhere. If you'll see one kid run and jump on the fence, and it'll be a couple of seconds before another kid goes and runs and jumps on the fence next to him. You'll see one kid pick up some grass and throw it, and then you'll see another kid pick up some grass and throw it. So I always pay attention to playgrounds, because you might see some natural leadership, but what you see is influence. So I believe with all my heart that every single one of us have the ability and have already influenced other people. That's why I know everyone has the potential to truly be a leader. But just remember this. Number one, it's about influence, and it's not good and it's not bad. It's just influence. Let's get into number two. Number two is the environment. I'm talking about leadership. Number one, it's about influence. Number two, it's about the environment. Now, when I lay out the environment and I say every environment, the environment is almost the most important thing when it comes to leadership, because it almost single-handedly dictates the type of leader that's there. Automatically, without asking, it'll float to the top or sink to the bottom. And what I mean is this: when I look at any environment, now you say, what's an environment? Well, I guess this on this call might be an environment. We're inside this Zoom call. It might be an environment. But for most of us, it's easier to think about like inside your bedroom would be an environment, right? Inside a car would be an environment. Maybe a certain hallway in school, maybe the locker room, maybe the school bus. And the environment can certainly be broken up as well. Like you might have the front of the classroom and the back of the classroom. We may have one environment, but there might be separate environments within that environment. Now listen very carefully to me. Every environment is dictated by the top 10% of people in that environment doing positive things, with the bottom 10% of people doing negative things. Everybody else in that environment, right? So if you have 100 people, that means there's 10 positive influencers and probably 10 negative influencers, and everybody else is in this 80%. Now, everybody listening to this call, whether you're a business owner, whether you're already a manager or some kind of leader, whether you're captain of the sports team, we've all spent time in this 80%. Every single one of us. And every environment is dictated by the top 10% of people in that environment and the bottom 10% of people in that environment. Now, if I had a couple of young people in front of me, this is what I do. I said, okay, let me show you how this works. Because sometimes people may not buy this, but let me show you how it works. Any one of you, let's say Luke is on here listening. And I walked up to Luke in front of all the other kids in the room and I said, hey man, let's pretend you and I are best friends. Okay. And some nights some Saturday nights you spend the night at my house. Okay. And I walk up to you on Friday and I'm like, yo man, my mom said you could spend the night. You want to spend the night this week? We'll chill and watch a movie or whatever. Luke's like, I don't know, man. Let me call my mom. And he gets his phone. He calls his mom. He said, yo, mom, can I spend the night at Tom's house? Yeah, sure. What did she say? She said I could. And then I'm like, oh, darn. Yo, I forgot to tell you, Luke. My mom's told me that my mom goes to this church group thing. I don't really go with her, but she does it every week. And once a month, she goes to this old folks home and, she makes me go with her once a month. Like, it's really kind of stupid. But anyway, I just go right up to this old guy's room. This guy was in Vietnam. Like, crazy stories, man. I just go sit there. I bring him some candy, too, because he's got nobody that goes to sit with him. But I just go right up there. I don't really like going, but I go right up there. Dude, he tells me the craziest stories, like crazy stuff, like stuff he probably shouldn't tell me that they did over there. Like, it's insane. And, my mom said the only way you could come over is if you go with us. But listen, if you go, please go, man. Like, I'll take you right up there. We'll chill with that guy. I'll make him tell you like the craziest stories. And my mom said that she's going to take us to breakfast afterwards. And we don't have to go till like 11 o'clock. Would you go? Now, Luke's shaking his head right now. He's like, yeah, sure, bro. I'll go with you. What did I do? I'm in my bedroom. I'm in my car. I'm in front of a bunch of friends. I'm in a certain environment. I just influenced him to do something positive. I pulled him that direction. He may not want to go. He may not like old folks' homes. Maybe he had a bad experience. Maybe he lost a loved one there and it was just not great for him to be there. But I just influenced him as a friend. Now, here's the other side. Same character, right? Maybe I pick somebody else in the crowd. And I walk over to somebody else and I'd be like, yo, bro, my mom's leaving for the weekend. You want to come over? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Like, I don't even have to tell you what that means. I'm influencing you to watch something, to read something, to smoke something, to drink something you probably shouldn't be doing. I'm influencing you to make a choice, right? Make a negative choice based on the culture that we're in to do something that we probably shouldn't do. Now, there's not one person on here that hasn't had somebody pull them in a certain environment to do something positive or pull someone to do something negative. And many of you have pulled people to do things positive and negative already. And if you've done that, you're a leader, you're influencing someone, but it changes in every environment. Now, I know this because the back of the school bus is different than the front of the school bus. I know this because when the coach walks in the locker room, the game changes. The influencer changes in the environment. Every environment is dictated by that top 10 or 20 or top or bottom 10% of people in the particular environment. And this is important to know because if you're going to be in any environment, you got to be ready for that influence to change like that. You might not be the influencer the next time you walk into a room, or you might be. Or you might have to have a strategy, right? If you're not in that top 10 or not the bottom 10, but if you're not in that top 10% of people influencing people in a positive way, if it's really hard to go to the back of that school bus and exert some positive influences, that's a tough thing to do. But you have to be ready. Every environment that you walk into, young people, you got to be ready to have that environment dictated by the top 10, the bottom 10. But it also means you may have to hightail it out of the environment. You may walk into a classroom where there's no teacher and things are going on and people aren't distancing or doing whatever they're supposed to be doing. And you might just have to take off if you can't influence that environment, whereas there's a chance you might not be able to. So number one, it's about influence. Number two, it changes based on the environment. Every environment is dictated by the top 10 and the bottom 10% of people. Everyone. And all of us from time to time fit in that middle spot in particular environments. Number three. All right. It's about influence, changes based on the environment. Now, this is probably the most important thing, especially for young people. Now, if you're watching right now, it's better if I just do it like this. Simon says, make a circle. Now, if you're watching, even there in Erie at PFEW, Karen and all of you, make a circle. If you're not listening, if your dad's next to you, he's still sitting there. He's probably not just looking like, oh, I don't need to do this. Yes, you do. So if you're sitting here watching, make a circle. I'm still waiting. There's still one or two of you. If you're in a room by yourself, make a circle. I'm telling you, you have to do this. This is the most important thing with leadership. All right. Everybody's got their circle just like this with their fingers. All right. Now listen carefully to me, right? Now watch me here. Simon says, take that circle and put it on your chin. Now I want some of you, especially you that are all by yourself, I want you to think real carefully right now. What did I say? Put it on your chin. On your where? Now, there's a few of you that are looking at your dad right now and you're giggling and laughing because he's sitting there like this and he's like, what? I did exactly what he said. Put it where, Dad? On your where? Your chin, not on your cheek. Now, some of you are laughing right now. Simon says, put it away. Some of you will just stand there and keep it right there. Put it away. Why did you put it right here? And then you're going to immediately say, oh, because that's what you did. Exactly. Because leadership is never about what we say. Leadership is about what we do. That's right. And how do we know this? In the early 1990s, Italy, these monkeys, these macaw monkeys, they did these experiments. And one of the scientists forgot, they were mapping certain parts of this monkey's brain. And they were mapping the motor cortex at the time. And one of the scientists had forgot his or her lunch. And they started to eat the nuts that they were using to train the monkey. And a particular portion of that monkey's brain began to light up. And people were like, what's going on here? The monkey's not eating. But the same part of his brain is lighting up in the motor cortex like he's eating. Just like he's eating. And that was the discovery, really, of these very special neurons called mirror neurons. It's the discovery of the mirror neurons. And there's been tons of studies done in the last 25 years on these neurons. They're one of the most important things when it comes to even the growth of things like empathy. But when it comes to leadership, they're the most important thing, because leadership is never about what we say. And parents, if you're listening, pay close attention, because some of you think your job is to tell your kids what to do. It's not. It's to show them what to do. So 3 things what leadership is. Number 1, it's about influence. It's not good, it's not bad. Number 2, it changes based on the environment. Every environment is dictated by the top 10% and the bottom 10% of people in that environment, and it changes in almost every single environment like that. You got to be ready for that. And last but not least, leadership is never about what we say, it's about what we do. So those are the 3 things that I say, what's leadership? It revolves around influence, the environment, and what we do. Okay, now we're at this part right here. Now that I've kind of set up what leadership is, people always say to me, they say, kids say, why do you paint your fingernails? And I say, duh, I'm a superhero. Then I skip right over it. I already told you that. When adults say it to me, I kind of always nonchalantly, when they're like, hey, when they finally have the courage to ask me, because you'll be surprised, adults will look at my fingernails and they won't say anything. They'll just look at them and wonder. But when they finally have the courage to, and they get to know me enough, and they say, what's up with the fingernails? And I just say, casually, like nonchalant, kind of the same way I just skip over it with kids. I just say, I don't believe in telling kids what to do. And then I usually just continue my conversation. And that's like a real head scratcher for adults. And they're like, excuse me? I just don't believe in telling kids what to do. So I paint my fingernails. And usually it leads into a much more meaningful discussion than that. But that's how I set it up. And then I start with the first one. And we're going to go through all of these in the next half an hour. I start with red. I go to blue, black, green, gold, green, pink, and white. Sorry, I don't want to make sure we don't miss anything, and I want to get through it all. I always start with this one. And this started for me way back in 2014 or maybe a year before that. It's when my daughter went to driver's ed. And I had just changed my career after 14 years. The company that I was with decided they were going to merge with another company, and we just didn't have a great fit. And I stuck it out with that company for 2 years. It was a multi-billion-dollar company, and I had helped actually build the company that joined this company. And, I tried to really stick it out, and I had an opportunity to do Sweethearts and Heroes full time back in 2013 or 14. And I made the decision myself. I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. And that day I had left the company that I had been with for 15 years almost. And that's a tough thing to do because the whole game changed for me. I unemployed myself, I didn't have a job, and I was going to go talk to kids for a living. And I was sitting in the back of the room. It was the night that parents got invited to go to driver's ed. And I was sitting back there, and I can remember sitting up against the wall, and I was just rubbing my head like this, and I was having all kinds of thoughts. Did I make the wrong decision? I got to pay my bills, and, oh man, what am I going to do? And the person in the front said, we need someone to paint their fingernails. And I didn't even think about it. I just stood up. There was about 50 people in the room, and I walked to the front, and I sat in a chair. And she said, I just want you to put those thumbs out. And I painted them red, just like this. And that started my journey way back then. And for 6-7 years now, I've had my fingernails painted. And when I get in front of young people, I always say, how many kids die every day in North America because people, you know what I'm doing, text and drive. How many? Not 2. Looks like number 11. 11 kids die every day in North America because people text and drive. Now, I don't text and drive because now some of you said responsible adult. No, because I'm a superhero, right? Superheroes save lives. They don't take lives. I don't text and drive because I'm a superhero. These is called red thumb reminder. It reminds me when I'm in the car, when I touch my phone, to stop, I could take the life of a young person, and I'm not allowed to do that. Now, that's how the whole journey for me started, but that very quickly faded, and I don't mean the actual red thumb reminder, but what it really got me to see was there's a lot of you young people that are listening right now that are driving cars. And when you got your license, your parents probably told you, or whoever you live with, told you two things. They said, don't drink and drive, and don't text and drive. Now, don't throw your parents under the bus here, but how many of you have seen mom or dad or your guardian be like, I just have to type this one word. Okay, I'm done. Now, if you're honest with me, over half of the people listening to this have seen your parents do that. That's not leadership. You're not allowed to tell your kids, right? Don't do that when they see you doing something completely different, right? Because leadership is not, you're in that environment, you're the influencer as the parent, and you're showing them something that you're telling them not to do. That's not good leadership. Now, for me, it really translates into all the little things that adults that I do, and I tell my kids something different. And this is when my own parenting, if any parents are listening, really changed forever. When I really deeply figured this out. And I'm with young people all the time, and I always say, how many of you have a little brother or little sister? And somebody throws their hand up, and I say, okay, what do you got? I got this 8-year-old brother or little sister. And I say, okay. I say, here's about the time, if you're in middle school or even early high school, where you might start messing around with cigarettes or vaping. That's a big thing these days. And I'm not even here to tell you it's wrong. I'll tell you, I don't think it's very healthy. It might be age appropriate for you to experiment. It's just the truth. Not saying it's good for you, not saying you should do it. But a lot of kids, middle school, high school, they'll start giving that a try. And here's what happens. And here's what I want you to think about. The next time your little brother, or little sister, or cousin, or friend from across the street goes into your room and finds your pack of cigarettes or finds your jewel, here's what you have to do. You ready? Let's pretend it's a pack of cigarettes. Here, you want one? Here, no, take one. That's all you're allowed to say if your little brother or little sister finds your pack of cigarettes. That's it. Now, some of you are like, oh my God, I'd never do that. Well, I mean, that's what you're doing. You're the influencer in that environment, and you're showing them something, but you're telling them something completely different. Now, what you're going to tell them is this. You're going to say, oh my God, you have no idea how stressed out I am. Mom and dad are going through a divorce, and you don't know what I'm going through, right? No. None of that matters. You're the influencer. You're firing those mirror neurons and other things in their brain. Just give them one and move on. That's leadership. Now, I take inventory every day of the little things that I tell kids to do, but I show them something completely different. I did that with my own kids. And over and over again, that self-awareness that I talked about in the beginning, that looking in the mirror constantly, everything that comes out of my mouth, I say, oh, am I showing my kids something different? Am I showing other young people something different? So this really isn't about red thumb reminder. It's about everything that I do. And if you're a parent on here listening, you should certainly take some pretty deep inventory yourself of all the little things that you tell your kids to do, but you show them something completely different. That's not leadership. So that's where I start with young people when it comes to leadership. And then I move into this one right here. And I always walk up to somebody in the room and I say, that's the most deadly finger on my hand. I could kill someone with this finger. And I usually get right in someone's face and just put it right under their nose like this. And I say, because it's the one that some of you just said pull a trigger. And I say, no, it's the one that I hit send with, right? And in this brave new world, students, in this brave new world that we live in, if you're going to be a leader, one of the first things that you have to do is think about your technology. Now, I get into this deeply because blue is the national anti-bully color, and it's very important to me because one of the things that I hear all the time reading the statistics is the last thing that she read or saw before she went up to her bedroom and made the unthinkable decision was what somebody sent to her. So that's the National Anti-Bully color. That's why I say it's the most deadly finger on your hand, because when you hit it, you can't take it back. Now, I don't just go into the bullying side of this. If you're going to be a leader, you better fully understand technology and this brave new world, because leaders don't do that. Now, I had to figure this one out, and years ago, I figured this one out. Now, I own a restaurant up in northern Vermont, and this is where I figured this one out, because whenever I hire a new hostess, it's my favorite position to hire. It's usually a young lady, 15, 16, 17, high school student. And when she gets there, a lot of times it's her first job, and she's a little intimidated and she's nervous. And sometimes it's a young man, but a lot of times it's just a young lady. And this one time I hired this young hostess named Hannah. Actually, I had 3 Hannahs that worked there, but I hired this one named Hannah years ago. This is really when I figured this one out. And whenever I hire any hostess, I always walk up to them and I say, their first day on the job, they're standing by the door at the hostess station. And I spend most of my time there. And I'll tell you why here in a second. And I walk up to them and I say, there's one boss in this restaurant. You know who it is? Huh? One boss. You know who it is? And they're like, you? And I'm like, I'm the janitor. I got to clean up all the messes. There's one boss here. I said, who pays for those lights to be on, Hannah? I don't know. You? No, I don't pay for the lights to be on. Who pays for the music to play? And I wait until she gets it. And just like some of you, she goes, the customer? I said, yeah. I said, they own the restaurant, Hannah. I mean, honestly, I believe that with all my heart. They own the restaurant. You wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. The lights wouldn't be on if they didn't show up. They're the most important thing in the restaurant. And sometimes the boss shows up and she's having a really bad day. And when you open the door for her and ask how she's doing, and you didn't even know she was going through a divorce, and she's having a really, really difficult time, and you see her and you talk to her a little bit, I said, you're probably going to make her feel really good. I said, and then when we screw up and we burn her meal, or her food comes out late and she's not really happy with us, and you apologize to her and you open the door for her and you tell her how much you enjoyed her son in the soccer game, you probably just saved the day for us, Hannah. Now, one time I was on the road with Sweethearts and Heroes. That's a lesson I give to most young ladies at the door, how important her job is, that she is the most important job in the restaurant. She meets the boss when he or she comes in, and she gets to say goodbye to the boss when we screw it up. If she's really doing her job well, she's the most important person in the restaurant, the hostess at the door. And one time I got a call on my phone. I was presenting, and in between presentations, I called the restaurant, and one of the managers is like, Tom, I need your help. You're not, we got fired today, because they know what kind of language I like to use. And I'm like, what happened? She goes, well, I saw these people standing at the door, and the guy slammed the door and walked out, and I actually chased him down the street. And I said, excuse me, sir, is everything okay? And he goes, no, it's not okay. I've been standing at that door for 20 minutes, and nobody's greeted me. I'm never coming back to this restaurant again. And I said this, what I said on the phone to the manager. I said, where the heck was Hannah? And she goes, where do you think she was, Tom? In the dish room with the dish boy. And now she's bringing him clean dishes. And for me, as the janitor, as the owner of the restaurant, I got to clean up that mess. So what a lot of managers, leaders will do is, Hannah, when I get home, you better be there 30 minutes early on Friday, and we're going to talk, and I'm going to tell your mom, and you probably aren't going to have your job. This is the last time. Now, I can do that as the leader, and many of you have sent people things and just blast them because you did, because you were the influencer in whatever environment. That's what you did. I never do that, because Hannah is sitting at her desk. She's got her phone jammed into her Uggs at school. And when she gets that note from me, she's going to look at it. And what's she going to do about that when she gets it from me? Nothing. She's going to be scared to death that she's going to lose her job, be embarrassed. Her parents are going to find out. I don't have the right to do that as the leader. I always do the same thing with my technology. Anyone that I'm in charge of leading or have the potential to lead, I always say, hey, Hannah, I'm going to be home on Friday. Can't wait to see you. See how field hockey is. Maybe you can come in a few minutes early. That's my responsibility as a leader. Or to say, hey, could you give me a call when you're free? That's my responsibility. I never have the right to use technology in a way that could evoke fear, anger, frustration in anyone that I'm leading. I don't have that right, and I never, ever do. And if you're going to be a leader, you're not allowed to do that. That's the blue one. Lets me talk about cyberbullying, lets me talk about the danger and how extreme it can get, but it also reminds me that if I'm a leader and I got one of these things in my hand, I'm never allowed to send something and abuse that power. That's that one. Black. Now this one I changed up a little bit just for this presentation, and this one is extremely important to me. It changed to this one a little bit. I told you that more and more of the police reports say the last thing she was doing was reading what other people wrote, reading what other people said about her online. And I certainly don't think bullying or cyberbullying causes suicide, but we know that kids that get cyberbullied are 3 to 4 times more likely to make a destructive decision. And that's why when I talk about that black one, I could fill books and books around the kids that I've met, in the 1 million+ kids that Rick and I have talked to that have dealt with this thing called hopelessness. Now, if you were on our last call, and I'll make this one real short because this is not a Sweethearts and Heroes call, but one of the first things that I have to do as a leader is make sure that I understand if there's anyone in the environment that I'm in that feels hopeless. Now, that's hard to do sometimes because sometimes you don't quite know it. But behavior is a form of communication. And if you really pay attention, you can see kids. But sometimes it's pretty darn easy. You have kids that are in your classes, in your teams that just don't have a lot going for them, that are really struggling. So I pay close attention. And as a matter of fact, I just put this one in just for this presentation. Here's a letter of a young lady from your state. Now, this is 3 or 4 years ago, and you don't have to read the whole thing, but I was in a presentation, and there was over 1,000 kids in this audience, and she's graduated now, and she's moved on in life. And when I went in that assembly, she never really looked at me, and she had a bonnet on. I remember she was kind of in the front, and I never really made eye contact with her, and that kind of caught my attention. But when I was all done presenting, I was in the auditorium talking to a bunch of kids, and I felt this piece of paper slide into my hands. Now, this piece of paper sits on my wall up in front of me, and I've seen it for years. And here's a young lady, and this is one of the number one things kids face, is this feeling of hopelessness, and especially today and what kids are going through. But here's a young lady in a story, and some of you probably are taking the time to read it, but if you didn't, I'll just summarize it real quickly. Her dad dies unexpectedly. Her 3 brothers, they burned to death in the house fire. She struggles with depression, PTSD. She has a mass on her lungs the size of a golf ball. She's got asthma. She comes to school and kids throw food at her. They call her an animal beater. They started a club called the Amish Mafia. She says she doesn't have enough food to eat. There's no heat in her house. Her mom works 3 jobs. She smells like a barn because she's got to do her chores. Her cousin dies just before Christmas. She says how she hurts herself. Some powerful stuff there. And then it literally says in here, the kids ask her if she took pictures of the ashes of her brother. That's some tough stuff. And we know, and this is my little Sweethearts and Heroes plug, that empathy has been nearly cut in half in kids over the last 30 years. So as a leader, and a lot of times I put it above these red ones and above this blue one, one of the first things I do is I try and figure out if there's any people in that environment that truly feel hopeless. And this reminds me every single day to keep my eye on that one, to recognize the people in the environment that I'm in all the time. Doesn't matter if it's on the street, doesn't matter if it's in the parking garage, it doesn't matter if it's in my house, it doesn't matter in anything that I'm part of. I'm always paying attention to those kids that might feel hopeless. I don't want to get lost in that, but I will tell you that hopelessness has a whole bunch of different faces, and You know, I've had several experiences traveling across the country, and a couple of years ago, I really started talking, and this can be a little controversial, but I think I feel pretty good about saying this, but, you know, when Parkland happened, you know, I really thought deeply about that, and I thought, you know, maybe that Nicholas Cruz, I'm sure he had some real issues, but I bet he was pretty hopeless. You know, I bet it was years of nobody taking the time to talk to him or bring him a hot chocolate or ask him to go to the movies, just years of struggling. And I was actually at a school, and you have to excuse me, I could end up talking about this one forever because it's what the most important thing to me is to figure out these kids that feel hopeless. And there was a school up in New York that I was at, and in the next town over, a kid had brought a gun to school, and it made the news when I was in the area. And I was actually at another school just down the road, and the principal is a good friend of mine. And when I got there, I got there at 7 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't wait because I really respect this middle school principal. And I'm like, hey, man, did you hear about what happened up the road? And he said, yeah, Tom, actually, my son is a junior at that school. And I was like, whoa, really? I'm like, well, what the heck happened? And I could tell he didn't really want to talk about it. He was a little ashamed, the principal. He said, well, I asked my kid about the young man. And first thing he said, honestly, Tom, he said, Dad, the kid's a scumbag. And he said, I talked to my son about that. And, you know, we had a good conversation, but, you know, and I'm not criticizing his son, but, you know, that's what was said. And then this principal did the most remarkable thing, pulled out his phone, and he pulled up a Instagram video of that young man that brought the gun to school. And he made a video, and he said, if you don't leave my transgender friend alone, you're all going to be sorry. That was the video that he posted well before he brought that gun to school. Nobody was hurt, thank goodness. But what was the young man guilty of with this half-grown brain? He was guilty of the most supreme ethic of loving another person, and he just couldn't take it. Behavior is a form of communication. And I'm not certainly defending that young man one iota, and I'm not defending Nicholas Cruz, but hopelessness has a lot of different faces. If you turn your news on today and you watch what's going on, I'm not sure I see disorder and chaos. I think I see a lot of hopelessness out there. And I think we need a lot more sweethearts and heroes to combat that hopelessness. So let me move on from there. And I got to pick up the pace here. So we're talking about the little things, right, that make a huge difference that we show people rather than tell them. We talk about our technology in this brave new world, paying attention to those kids that are hopeless. And then you say, what leads a person to hopelessness? And that's why I have this gold one, because I kind of rewrote the golden rule that one book says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I just kind of changed that. And I say, why don't you do better to other people than you want done to yourself? And I understand that what leads a kid to hopelessness is one of two things. It's the same thing that leads 22 service members to hopelessness every single day in this country: lack of meaning or purpose and significance. And this reaches back to that Sweethearts and Heroes presentation that we gave. And I won't go down that hole and talk a lot about significance, meaning, purpose is what I think a lot of kids are struggling with today, and human acceptance. What I will say that my job as a leader is to identify the meaning or the purpose of the people that are in that environment and to find them something. Now, I learned this from an 8-year-old little girl that came home, and she ran up to her daddy and said, Daddy, you're never going to believe this. I was the chair stacker today. Someone gave her some purpose that day. She didn't run home and say how much she liked her math class or her English class. She came home and said, I have some kind of meaning. So my job as a leader is always to find meaning and purpose for every single person in that environment. I can't tell you how important that is if you want to be a leader. That's your job, not to build your own meaning or purpose or significance. If you do your job, that will just happen. Your job is to help build that meaning in other people. And the other one is acceptance. Now, this is a tough one because we say, well, I can't get people to accept other people. But what you can do is you can show them how to accept other people by you doing it. Now, I talk to parents about this one all the time because there's a lot of parents that, look out their window as they're washing the dishes and the neighbor's like 3 inches like on their lawn. And they're like, if this guy just get off my lawn. And then sometimes we wonder why kids go to school and somebody puts a piece of tape that's like 3 centimeters touching their locker. And they're like, if she put that tape on my locker one more, well, what have they seen, right? You got to think about that. And you got to understand that your job as a leader is to show acceptance. We're having a real difficult time with that one in our country right now. So that's the gold one. I understand the meaning of what humans need, some kind of meaning or purpose in their life. My job is to find it for people in the environment that I'm influencing and to help show them how to do certain things. And it's also to show people how to accept other people. Now, I'm going to probably go a few minutes over here, but I want to just get through the end of this. Green. Now, when you cross your fingers, you wish for something or you hope for something. And green is the color of hope. And this one reminds me that my job is to give hope to everyone that I meet. I understand because of my friend Rick Yarst that every single human has hope inside of them that they could give to other people. And my job is to show people how to do that. Now, I learned this one at the restaurant years ago as well. We have this waitress. Her name is Carrie. She's a single mom, unbelievable, amazing human. Our relationship has just grown over the years, mostly because I learned to be a better leader. But years ago, we had this great outside seating, like just 50, 60 chairs. And the difficulty in the summer is you have to show up and you have to get there early and you have to set it up. And sometimes it takes like an hour and you're like dripping sweat and it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. One day, Carrie gets there early in the morning. She shows up. She starts setting up. I was there doing some work because it was summertime. And she comes running in about halfway into this setup. And she's like, Tom, you know that homeless guy? And I was like getting ready to get up because she was acting like he must have got hit by a car. And I'm like, yeah, the one with the big beard and always dirty. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, what about him, Carrie? And she's like, he's sitting at one of the tables. And I was like, is it set up yet? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, is there any customers out there that need it? She's like, no. I was like, why don't you just leave him alone? He's probably tired. We'll deal with it if somebody comes. And she's like, okay. And then she finished setting up. About an hour later, she comes running in. And she's like, Tom, he's still at the table. And I need it now. And I was like, well, ask him to move. You would ask anyone. And she immediately was like, I can't talk to him. Now, this guy, and I'm not making fun of him, but like he talks to people that aren't there. And I've seen him like hand cigarettes to imaginary people. And he talks in like a language that isn't even English but it's not any language. It's like his own made up language. And he's like that guy that if you watch him in the park, like you can't take your eyes off him because you're like, what's he going to do next? So you're like looking like this. And I'm not trying to be hurtful or disrespectful. It's just different. And your brain doesn't know what to do with it. So I was like, Carrie, watch this. And I walked outside and all the tables were full except for his. And I was like, hey man, could we use that table? There's people over there who would like to use it. You can come back when we're done. And he mumbled something, but he got up and stood by the jewelry store. And I walked back inside. I'm like, there you go, Carrie. And she's like, thanks. And I just went about my thing and we never made a big deal of it. 4 o'clock rolls around. It gets real slow in the business at that time. Carrie comes running back in. And she's like, this is hours later. She goes, Tom, he's back. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, and now he's smoking at the table. I'm like, well, Carrie, you're not allowed to smoke at the tables. You got to ask him to stop. And she goes, I just can't talk to him. I'm like, watch this, Carrie. And I walk outside and I didn't want to embarrass him. I'm like, hey man, you're not really supposed to smoke at these tables. I'm like, could you finish your cigarette in that alley and I'll go get you some water and you can come back when you're done. And now he's looking at me like I'm crazy. But he gets up and he goes to the alley and sits down, finishes his cigarette. and I went and got him some water. You know where you could find Gary, a Vietnam veteran who served our country proudly before schizophrenia took him? All winter long, you found him in the restaurant. You know who was serving him? Carrie, buying him ice cream, the other waitresses buying him coffee. I had to show them how to give hope to someone who other people didn't want to. They just didn't know how to. Now, I did check with the local, authorities, and Gary wasn't dangerous at all, and he's never had an issue. And all winter, Gary spent shoveling our sidewalk and picking up cigarette butts. And then Gary disappeared like months after. And I remember coming home from a couple of presentations, and I was like, anybody seen Gary? Like, just disappeared. And then the most amazing thing happened. You can't make this story up. I came home a couple weeks later from presenting, and someone hands me this postcard. And if you look it over, you can kind of figure it out. It's written, and there's a lot of it that just doesn't make sense. But if you start to piece it together, it says gotten arrested. It says his address, and it says a bunch of stuff on there. It says the hospital, Burlington. So he's obviously probably there. But there's only one thing on this entire postcard that really even matters. Only one thing. And I already talked to you about it. How does Gary sign that postcard? Now, the name of the restaurant is Twigs, Twiggs. Twigs helper. Meaning, purpose we gave him, and we accepted him. See, that's all people need that you're going to lead. Some kind of meaning, some kind of purpose, and acceptance. But see, Carrie and the other waitresses just didn't know how to do that because no one's ever showed them. We all learned to give hope the wrong way. Somebody was walking down the street and they were different, and mom and dad pulled us to the other side of the street and said, let's walk down this side of the street, honey. Where they were coming out of the grocery store and they stopped us and they said, ooh, let's let that guy go first, sweetie. And then we send kids to school or in different environments and we say, hey, make sure you stick up for those kids that are different. But we showed them something completely different their whole lives. So that's why I paint these ones green. I know that for me, my job is to show people how to give hope to those people that need it the most. All right, I got two more and I'll make them quick, I promise. Now this one here, if you're a parent or you're a teacher watching, if you could please just look there or over there. I'll tell you when to look back, okay? If your parents are here, make them look the other way. You ready? In 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, make them look. Ready? All right. This is my forgiveness finger. So, all right, quick. You can look back, parents. I hope nobody took a screenshot. That's my forgiveness finger. Now, what I learned is one of the greatest lessons of leadership, and that's this thing called forgiveness. And I learned to forgive the wrong way. Just like any of you parents, just like any of you students, you all learned how to forgive the wrong way. And I'll prove it to you. You were 3 or 4 years old. You knocked someone over on the playground. Your mom bent over, picked the other kid up, wiped him off, and said, "Oh, sweetie, say you're sorry." And you mumbled through sorry. And then as you got older, when you became a little bit more disagreeable and you did something to your brother or sister, your dad grabbed you by the shirt or poked you in the chest and said, "Say you're sorry. Look at her right now and say you're sorry. Now. Do it." And then when you said, sorry, your dad said, "And mean it." Now, some of you are laughing because you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's how we learned how to say sorry. And I always say, what a terrible way. And if you're a father listening to this right now, pay very close attention because I had to learn this lesson myself. I always say next time you're coming home from work and your car's breaking down, your boss is a jerk, you're in a fight with your wife and it's probably your fault, and you walk through that door and there's your 13-year-old daughter on the couch screwing with her phone, and you're like, huh. And you go to the kitchen to grab a soda and there's the dishes like coming out of the sink. Here's what you do every time, Dad. You make a beeline for that living room and you get right in her face and you say, "I told you the next time I come home, if those dishes are, get in there now." And you throw her in there and she jams her earbuds in and she starts slamming those dishes in the dishwasher. And you go to the living room, you jump on the couch, crack that soda open, you turn the TV on. And there's a story of a guy that went to Iraq, got blown to heck, lost his ears, lost his nose, lost his leg. And here's what you'll do every time, Dad. Whew, man, my life ain't that bad. Whew. That's the moment you call her back in. And when you do, she's going to be burning holes in you with her laser beams. And here's what you do. Hey, I'm sorry for being a jerk. I should have never spoken to you that way. It's not an excuse. I'm just having a bad day. I'm really, really sorry. You want the last soda? And you should watch this with me. It's incredible. And I'll do the dishes for you. Now, some of you are like, my dad would never say that. Imagine if we raised a generation of young people that showed people how to say sorry, how to forgive. Didn't just tell them, we showed them. And imagine if you're a leader, like how are your people supposed to know how to make mistakes if they never see you make one? If you're perfect and you think as a leader, you always got to be right, never apologize, or you're just supposed to always make the right decisions, you're not a good leader. You got to understand that they need to see you make mistakes. How are they supposed to deal with mistakes? How are they supposed to bring things to you and talk to you about certain things if they never saw how to do that before? It's the greatest lesson of leadership. And that's why I paint this one pink, because I had to learn this thing called forgiveness all over again. And I got some great stories of how I've used it that I don't have time for. I just want to cover one last one, and then I'll summarize them. But it's this one right here. The ancient Egyptian, it's fun to do this in schools. You do this in the cafeteria, and there's like a cafeteria monitor, a teacher that's like, hey, oh! And you're like, no, bro, that's my commitment finger. The ancient Egyptians believed there was a vein that went from here to your heart, right? So I think that commitment is one of the most important things in terms of leadership. And if you think about the Stanford, I think it was the Stanford marshmallow experiments, or the great ancient philosopher pre-Socrates Zeno said, man conquers the world by conquering himself. For me, I really take what Harry Truman said. He said, in reading the lives of great men, I added great women. He said the first victory they won was over themselves. With all of them, self-discipline, commitment came first. And all of these lessons, I am committed to. I'm committed to the little things that I show people versus tell them. I'm committed to how I use the technology as a leader. I'm committed to recognizing people that are hopeless and behavior being a form of communication. I'm committed to the hope that I have inside of me that I could give to other people and show other people. I'm committed to the people that I'm in charge of growing their meaning, their purpose, and showing other people how to accept them, especially the ones that are different. I believe commitment is one of the most important things that a leader can do. And I take it to a crazy level. I never ask people to be as committed as me. I got a 20-year lesson that I give to young people. And truth be told, if Rick Yarish were here, who's been with me for 8 years, I haven't said a curse word in 20 years. Now, nobody has heard me say a curse word in 20 years. And I don't think it's inappropriate to curse. My sister from Pennsylvania, from Williamsport, has a PhD in language. And she has 4 boys. And ever since they were like little, she lets them curse like sailors. As long as they use it appropriately. Like if they hit their finger, they're like, oh. And it's really strange going to her house when they were little. And you were like, whoa, did you hear what that kid just said? And she's like, well, yeah, Tommy used it appropriately. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, who am I to tell a PhD they're wrong? But for me, I was a sophomore in college, and I can remember I was looking in the mirror in my dorm, and I was struggling so hard to be different. I was struggling so hard. And I had this moment, this epiphany, that my thoughts are always the manifestation of my language. And I was walking around, students, parents, like I was in a locker room all the time. Like, how was I supposed to really change my being if I couldn't change my thoughts and my language? So that day I decided to go the whole day without saying a curse word. And 20 years later, I still haven't. And I don't think it's wrong to curse. I think it's age appropriate. I think if you're with your buddies, you should probably be lighting it up. Like, not in front of your parents or anybody else. And mom, dad, don't give them a hard time. It's like appropriate for them to figure out what's appropriate. Not. That's just what play does. And a certain amount of that is age appropriate play for teenagers. So, but for me, it's easy. It's lazy to just use that kind of language and not really think about language in general, and just to let it go out and not to have discipline, awareness of my thoughts and my language. So for me, in the business world, I went years never telling anybody that I didn't curse. But what I realized was I had this guy that worked for me, and he reminded me like a saint. His name was actually Peter. He had a little beard, and he adopted kids from China, and like, it was crazy. I mean, this guy was at church all the time, and not that that means anything, and one day I walk in to the office, and he had been there for 6 or 7 years, and I heard this string of curse words, and I was like, oh my God. And I went around the corner, and I was like, Peter? Like, St. Peter had just like lit up the room. And what I realized that day was he talks like that all the time. He just never does with me in that environment, because I'm the influencer, and I've never showed him that. I showed him something completely different, that a man can control their language. And in the industry that I was in, the railroad industry, not that it's right or acceptable, it's just heavily dominated male industry, and guys will be guys. And I didn't buy into that. And I said, no, that's not what makes a guy, is their language. It's their character. And so for me, I just committed to that years and years ago, just like I've committed to all these lessons. And I leave you with that. I'm a little bit over, but I ask you, please think about that SSA formula. Think about being very self-aware. Think about strategies. Think about the action that you're taking. Think about what leadership is. It's made up of these three things. It's made up of the environment. It's made up of what's dictated by the environment. It's dictated by the influencers in that environment, the top 10, the bottom 10 that pull that 80% in a direction. And then it's made up of what we do, primarily, not what we say. And then I gave you some great lessons on the little things, on your technology in this brave new world that we're all in. We talked about recognizing that hopelessness, the commitment we make, the commitments that we make. We talked about hope that we all have inside of us that we can give and show how to give to other people in those environments. And we talked about, to me, the most important lesson is that of forgiveness, because we can always reset by forgiving one another. Be committed to that, young people. Thanks for joining me. I hope I get to hear from you. I hope even I can make it to your school and talk about some of these great things with any of you. You all have free access to my information if you want to talk in greater detail. I love PFEW, and you should certainly make sure that you run to school or send a note to school about this amazing organization that brings all kinds of great value to helping young people and adults and parents now, which is something that people always came home from PFEW and said, that was incredible, it was amazing. And now parents get to see just how amazing some of these other speakers have been, and the lessons they've taught the young people that are going to continue to make our country great. So thanks so much, and hopefully I'll see some of you in a few minutes.
Wow. Thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for your time and yet another powerful presentation tonight. Can't thank you enough. We know how busy you have been mentoring young people through this trying time, but also with your other business, which I know our viewers are going to hear more about in a few weeks. But we just can't thank you enough for all you do for us, Tom. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to connect with Tom, his direct contact information is listed on our website and will follow at the conclusion. And I know he'd love to hear from you. So don't hesitate to reach out to him. Also, don't forget our live virtual meet and greet session with Tom will begin in 5 minutes. We invite all of you to join us there. Again, you can find the link to that session in the chat section now. Be sure to copy the link now, because as soon as we stop this webinar to start the meet and greet, the link will be gone. Simply exit out of this meeting and join using the meet and greet link. Tonight's event was recorded and will be made available to everyone in a few days on our PFEW website and our YouTube channel. Finally, thank you all again for all of our wonderful donors who have made all of our virtual programming possible, including this live speaker series, our pre-taped interviews, and also our free offering of the stock market game. We appreciate you all joining us this evening, and we look forward to gathering next Thursday at 8 p.m. when we will hear from Mr. Gary Morrison. Have a safe week, and we can't wait to join you next Thursday.